Tuesday afternoon on Radio West Fife. It's David and John by your side through until 3 o'clock today. It's the 18th of January. Where is this year going? Anyway, a little bit of confusion because we have managed to get Phil on the phone line. He sent me a text message to say he couldn't manage, as I explained earlier, and now we've managed to track him down. Good afternoon, Phil. How are you?
Good afternoon. I think we ought to explain what the confusion was. I assumed it was a late call from a mate of mine I often do lunch with.
So fobbing off your friends.
Yeah, fobbing off my friends for the chance to talk to you people.
Oh, absolutely brilliant.
Superb.
Anyway, Phil, you're from a Midlands-based band called LAF. You guys have been on the go since the 1980s. Can you tell us how the band got it together?
Initially, I'd been playing in various bands over the years, which played cover versions, that sort of thing, and got into writing my own songs. And technology had improved by the time we got into the mid-80s to the level where virtually anyone could buy their own recording setup. So I started recording songs on my own and realised that wasn't the way forward, because I sing like a drain, and I'm about as good a drummer as I am a singer. So I started getting other people in, and we realised before long that essentially we got a recording. So around 1987 we had to give ourselves a name, and bearing in mind this was the era of people like Tears for Fears, Hue and Cry, and people like that, we thought, okay, snappy three-word name. We called ourselves Lost and Found.
Nice ones, my favorite.
Therefore LAF.
Yeah, because we then started producing our own albums, but they came out on cassette, and Lost and Found are a lot of words to put on a cassette sleeve. so we thought, make it LAF because it's shorter, and
a bit snappier sounding as well, yeah.
Well, maybe. A bit more mysterious if I hadn't told you what it stood for.
How many people are actually in the band?
It's very much a movable feast. I mean, at the moment, we're recording a brand new album, which is based around a nucleus of Alistair Bowden, who's the singer and co-writer, and me. So we've had two different drummers doing stuff with us, a girl called Rachel who's singing backing vocals, and a bass player come guitarist, and a guitarist come bass player, and a keyboard player, which I think is about 8 at the minute, but when we get to go out live, I suspect we're going to be considerably fewer than that, just so we can all get on one stage.
Yeah, so you can all fit in there. You certainly have a unique style. How would you describe your music yourself?
Oh, that's an awkward question. I always chicken out and say, well, don't ask me, have a listen and tell me. I would say that the answer is probably, I mean, I'm from an era when the Beatles were king, and although they long split up at the time I started playing guitar, a lot of that rubbed off on me, and all those sort of melodic, songy type bands, people like the Beach Boys and so on. And I think we've just taken bits of that on board, and then the rest is just your own unique take on things, because obviously I don't play the guitar the same way that John Lennon used to do, etc. So it's just bits of everything thrown into a big stew, I think.
I mean, you guys have chosen elegance, charm and deadly danger as your tagline. Where does that come from?
I was afraid you were going to ask. Older people may remember. That comes from the mid-60s, when British comics came out quite a lot. And if you were a guy in the mid-60s, you used to buy TV 21, which was the guy's comic full of Thunderbirds and stuff like that. And if you were a girl, they did a spin-off based around the Lady Penelope character, and her tagline was actually elegance, charm and deadly danger.
I see.
I like that.
From reading your biography, I see that the only fuel required to let your creativity flow was a jacket potato.
That's right. We have moved on now. But yeah.
Sorry, you mentioned John Lennon as well. Who would you say are your other big musical influences?
Well, I am a big Moody Blues fan. I'm also a big fan of a band which I don't imagine anyone in the world has heard of, called Stackridge. They morphed into the Corgis in the early 80s, and Stackridge are now back playing again. And if you listen to the latest Stackridge album and listen to our stuff, you would probably see similarities. Alistair comes more from the British school of heavy metal, and was heavily into bands like Led Zeppelin, so we get a mix of that in as well.
On to a completely different subject. Stuart Ryan was your studio engineer in the early days. He was very inventive when it came to kitting out the facility. Can you tell us any of the stories about his studio improvisations and creations?
I mean, Stuart was an absolute marvel. Stuart was my next door neighbour shortly after I got married, and I found out very quickly he had a good singing voice, which I don't think he realised. So for a brief period of time, not only was he studio engineer, he was actually lead vocalist on one of our albums. But yes, I would go around to him and say, hey, look, top recording studios are using this piece of equipment. Can we do something? And one of the things was it's a pop shield, they call it. Now, pop shield in a professional studio is a circle of metal or plastic stretched in a very, very thin nylon type fabric, so that when you sing, that goes in front of the microphone, you sing into the pop shield, and all the and all that sort of stuff, and the spitting doesn't get through and get onto the recording, it gets picked up by the shield. We, of course, couldn't afford 50 or 60 pounds or whatever it was, so Stu says, I know what I'll do. He went and got a metal coat hanger, which he bent into shape. We then nicked a pair of my wife's old tights and stretched those over. It did the job.
Absolutely brilliant.
Just very worrying for people when I told them to come in and sing into my missus's tights.
Moving on, at the end of last year, you released your first full album for 15 years, Random Play All. How are things going with that?
It's going slowly but surely. The internet is a wonderful thing. I'll just sort of take you back just a little bit, because what happened, we worked, as I've been talking, till the mid-90s, and I'd got a small home studio, and then I had two children, a boy and a girl. They couldn't share the same bedroom, so my studio went and disappeared for a while. I just carried on writing songs, and then I thought I'd put together a MySpace page for the band, just so people would know that it existed, and suddenly it took off, and we got 20,000 followers. So we thought, right, let's write some new material, which we did, and we wrote four tracks in a very short space of time, which were called Sparkle. And then a friend of mine was putting together a record label called Jupiter's Moon, and he said, let's put together sort of a full-length album of stuff taken throughout your career, which was Random Play All, and that is now getting airplay literally worldwide. I know there are people in Chile who've got copies, and Canada. So you've got South America, you've got North America, people in Europe have bought copies. We just need people to buy loads more.
And all thanks to the internet as well.
What do you say is your best song out of your album?
Out of the album? Ooh. I am probably the worst judge of my own songs. I would say the feedback I get from people who've heard our stuff, that they would normally say either A Walk in the Sun or Mother's Prayer are probably the two most immediate ones.
Yeah, and what was the thinking of the two songs? Is there any sort of, how can I put it?
Story?
Yeah, story towards it.
Yeah. Well, Mother's Prayer is a straightforward. It's not a story song, but it's a straightforward message about sort of poor women who are stuck at home, slaving in the kitchens and doing all that sort of stuff, and actually just want to take a break and show who they are. A Walk in the Sun, on the other hand, was an idea which Steve Shepherd, who was a guitarist with the band in the mid-90s, initially started it with. He had the thought of two soldiers in the trenches in the First World War, and they knew that the following day was going to be the big push and they were going to go out and probably get massacred. And they were talking about, well, what would you like to do? If you knew this was the last day of your life and you could go anywhere or you could do anything, what would your choice be? And that's pretty much what that song's about.
Phil, you mentioned the internet there and how well it's helping to your music to carry. How can we find out more about LAF, and where do we find you online?
Right. Well, we have a website which is laf.me.uk, which is probably the best place. We're also on myspace.com and reverbnation.com. The only problem you'll have finding us there is that when we came to register the band's name for websites and that sort of thing, there was a guy who'd won either Britain's Got Talent or the X Factor called Tony LAF, and he'd taken every single website name which had LAF in it. So you'll often find the band's name as LAF Pop Music, just because I had to do something to get us registered.
So with a Google search, definitely better, LAF Pop Music.
Yeah, but who knows what might turn it. You might find something really interesting. I think it's the Libyan Armed Forces also come up as LAF, so we're not terrorists, just be warned.
Yeah, just be careful when you're typing it in.
Yeah.
Anyway, Phil, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to Radio West Fife this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
One last question, if you don't mind.
No.
Do you have any advice for budding artists who would like to kind of follow in what you're doing?
I would say stick with what you believe in. You've got to believe that you are right in what you're doing, whatever it is. Don't be swayed by anybody, just keep going, and at some stage the world will probably catch you up.